Well, thanks everybody for coming out today. As you're seeing in the Senate, things are going fairly smoothly. One of the things I would like to point out, though, is if you look at the number of bills we have passed so far, and we'll have more as the day progresses. I think the latest count was 76 or 77 minority bills. That's the highest that people have been able to figure out from a recorded standpoint. I think the next high was in 2011, where you had 54 bills out. So we really are trying to do this in a bipartisan manner. We're at over 30% of the bills passed out of the Senate have been minority bills. That's much higher than in the past, and it's currently higher. I think the House right now is at about 22%, and the House numbers are at all-time highs. Here they come. So, we're making great progress there. More importantly, I think, is the just the cooperation that you're seeing as we go forward. The revenue forecast comes out next week, and then we'll be coming out with our budget. But, we've done great things as far as, and John and Senator Brown, we'll talk about these as far as what we're doing on the jobs front. We did great things on the education front. So, when we started this, we said we're going to focus on jobs, education, and the budget. And I think we have lived up to that, and I think we have lived up to our mantra as far as we wanted to make this a bipartisan effort.
Hi.
How you doing?
Hi, good. Hi, we're working on some bills today. We've got not a real heavy lift today after yesterday of hanging out. So we just got a run list. We're going over it. Kathy was going to come to talk to you about our Fund Education First package. That's our main focus. That comes out tomorrow. Gary can hit on that and talk about some of our education reforms. We are coordinated with the Senate on a lot of our reforms, so that'll be an easier discussion to do without her. She's working on the DREAM Act right now. We're trying to get that out. The Speaker doesn't want the bill to move, and there's some issues around it, and we're trying to make sure that that bill does keep moving and be supportive of that. So I know there's lots of questions today, so I'm just going to kind of turn it over to who do you want? Gary to talk about Fund Education first, or Senator Brown to talk about?
Why don't we have Senator Brown, and then we'll do Gary, and then Senator Braun.
Sounds fantastic.
Well, it's been really exciting that the Senate has passed unanimously a couple of the bills that I've proposed with regard to streamlining businesses and creating a one-stop shop for businesses. When I was the mayor pro tem in the city of Kennewick, we did something very similar. We created a one-stop shop for our contractors to come, and they just loved it because it facilitated getting the plans approved, and if they had any questions of staff, there's one particular place where they could go, and it really helped to streamline the process and get things accomplished a lot more quickly. So do you want to talk about any of your bills?
We have to go. So just to follow on that, I think, or maybe to back up a little bit, we took the approach from the beginning that the best thing we can do for business development is to really improve our the cost of regulatory and tax compliance for our employers, and also to hopefully reduce costs by improving our industrial insurance program. So you'll see a lot of bills that are like Senator Brown's that are focused on ways we can make it smoother and easier, and therefore less costly for our businesses to do business and to follow the rules. And by taking that approach, we've been able to get a lot of pretty good bipartisan support and things that make sense, things that don't have to cost our state government, our taxpayers a lot of money, but yet save our businesses money. And I'd be happy to talk about individual bills, but thematically, that's where we focus. Where can we save money without spending a lot of money that frankly we don't have to spend?
It's self-serving.
Well, good afternoon. We're basically going to be releasing our Fund Education First budget tomorrow, and I will pleased to say that in preparing that, we took into consideration and put the necessary resources in for the 3 or 4 major reform bills the Senate has passed out. We think those are very important to the overall education solution, so we are incorporating all the education reform measures, both the House and the Senate, and as well as a very aggressive first phase in the McCleary decision, and we're prepared to demonstrate that budget tomorrow in terms of our obligation to fund education before we do anything else, and hopefully you take it off the table from the standpoint of any kind of necessary tax revenue increases to support it. I'll be prepared to demonstrate how we can balance the budget without recurring new taxes for the other part of the budget areas, but basically the details behind that will have to wait until the Senate produces their overall budget. The Senate comes out first, so we feel that from that standpoint we owe them the opportunity to produce their budget first and bring it over to us in their entirety. So
we're still giving you more than the governor's giving you.
Well, no, that's for sure. No, we really like the idea that the Senate is addressing some of the pro-business bills that basically will set the stage, which I think is the most important component to a balanced budget, is to renew the trust and confidence in our business communities to invest in themselves and therefore produce the revenues that will help us balance our budget not only for the upcoming 2 years, but hopefully for the foreseeable future as well.
So tomorrow's budget, it will just be what, a framework, but there's not going to be details?
It'll be a detailed budget for the K-12 education. It'll be a complete budget for K-12 education, and it will have the framework and a balance sheet for the balance of the budget. Because I know your questions will be, how do you get there without requiring new tax revenues? So I will demonstrate where the major areas are that we'll use to balance that budget.
And I think that's one of the things that the Senate really has brought a difference in conversation that we so typically hear in Olympia is, we're always dealing with deficits, but, we have over $2 billion of new money. If you look at the overall revenue, we're going to be in that $33 billion mark, somewhere in that area. And last biennia, if you look at education spending, we were at about $13.6 billion. Well, last time I checked, 13.6 is less than 33. And so I think one of the things that we're trying to get out there, because it's what the public wants to hear and what they're demanding, is let's quit putting the kids always out there when, we can solve the education problems. And the courts have clearly said that's where the direction you guys need to go. One of the other things that I would say, though, is in the Senate, we're not so worried about McCleary. We're more worried about making sure that our businesses have a workforce that works for them, and we're going to have to step up the game across the. We're in a global world. It's a high-tech world in a lot of industries, and being smart matters. And if we're going to maintain our wage structure and the American way of life and our standard of livings, we're going to have to ratchet it up, and that's really what we're focused on, and reconnecting learning to the dollars being spent, because what you're seeing right now is there's a lot of education dollars out there that are not being optimized, and one of the things that we'll put a strong focus on is making sure that when we do spend those dollars behind the reforms, you're spending dollars that really do make a difference.
Hey, I'm continuing that thread on Senate's passed a whole bunch of education bills, but none of them address the items that are specifically addressed in the bills that are cited in the McCleary decision. You have reforms, but they're not targeted on what the Supreme Court is zeroing in on. Can I get you to talk about that?
Well, I would say if you look at the history of McCleary and going back to the two previous major Supreme Court decisions dealing with education, the Doran decisions, they are not about dollars. And that's where, the conversation about here is always, it's just about money, it's just about money. No, it's about a program of education and making sure that our kids have the tools and skills necessary to compete. And that's why we're being so targeted in our reforms to make sure that it's just not about dollars, because if you look at over the last 8 years, we spent 29% more dollars in the system. Graduation rates are flat at 77%, which is clearly not acceptable. And we are one of only 2 states in the country where the achievement gap is increasing.
So, and John, to answer also, though, when McCleary came out, one of the things, though, our caucus has worked on for 6 years on the McCleary decision about spending your first dime on education. And so they know that, and we've all focused on it. We see no appetite in the majority party to have a fund education first budget passed. I think if we could see a reality check from the people to look at that portion of McCleary, which just says this is our priority, it doesn't say how you spend, it says your first dollar should go to education. I think we would probably be able to move towards having that separate education budget with the reforms in it that the Senate wants.
Okay, but a basic, this is grossly oversimplified, but a basic direction from the McCleary decision, if you look at the two bills that queued on, is more teaching bodies in the classroom. That takes money. If you want to improve the ratio of students to teachers in grades K through 3, and I think all-day kindergarten, you flat out need more bodies to do that. So none of the legislation I've seen so far addresses that.
Well, there's pieces in there, but I think what you will see is as we come out with our budget, how we redirect some of those dollars again into, we're looking at, like the WISPY studies and other studies that, we've done down here in Olympia, and looking at it from a data-driven standpoint, where is the best places to put your dollars? Because right now in education, a lot of times it's not, where's the best place we can put our dollars to move that needle? It's where are the best dollars to help our friends? And we're in this for student achievement.
Yeah, I would say that the bills you're seeing coming out of the House and the Senate, especially the ones that have strong bipartisan support from the Republicans' perspective, are setting up the mechanism to ensure the accountability that goes with the release of those dollars. We need to be sure that the dollars are going to be put in the right place, and that we're going to have the ability to demonstrate that we are providing the necessary tools so that those kids, when they graduate or go on to secondary education, are well prepared to do that. So I think the bills you see today are the ones that set up the overall structure, and when you'll see the actual dollar commitments come when the overall budgets are prepared.
Senator Tom, and I think that soon the governor is going to announce some proposed tax exemptions that he thinks should be sunsetted or closed. In light of the fact that you are interested in reforms around the exemption system, you have a bill that places a sunset. Is it appropriate, is the timing right to talk about actually sunsetting some of those as opposed to putting a sunset clause on future?
So what my bill would do is for all future bills, just when it comes to loopholes, exemptions, however you want to phrase it, it would basically say there needs to be a performance metric. What are we actually saying? Because so often what we see today is we try to have a JLARC study. Is it working or is it not working? And we don't know what was the intent of the legislature at that point in time. So if we're going to say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we should do this instead of, another program out there, because that's really, you can either spend it sometimes on tax breaks, or you could, spend that same money on a program. What are the benefits? And if it's going to save us 150 jobs, did it really save us 150 jobs? And then that way you would also have an expiration date, so that there would be a date certain, so that we don't get into the rollover problem. But a lot of what we've seen lately has been issues with, one, there's no metrics. We will have a performance metric. That accountability, again, is key. And then making sure that, when we judge these things, do they live up to it? And if they do, it was probably a good investment. If not, they expire.
And are you interested in the conversation that the governor wants to have about actually expiring some of this session?
Well, I think in conversations with the governor, he'll come out with a number, such as $1 billion. And my conversation was with him that I remember when there was 32 Democrats in our caucus, and we came out with that same song and dance, and at the end of the day, there was it was a pretty minimal number. A lot of those are in place for very specific reasons due to the current nature of our tax code. And so we can look at them, but I think to sit there and oversimplify it and say, we're going to save $1 billion. Certainly, if that could have been done, it would have been done in a Senate where we had 32 Democrats that were eager to do that.
And don't forget that these
dollars, more like a couple $100 million.
But don't forget, tax incentives are put in place because businesses in Washington State find our climate not competitive with other states. And it is a decision that is made by the legislature in the past that defines jobs and benefits to our economy by giving these exemptions in place. Some of them are around helping people to get home. Some of them are around helping agriculture. Some of them are around a regressive development environment that we have, a regressive tax system. So they put these exemptions out there to bring businesses in, okay, or to bring employers in, or to help people with added expenses and burdens that are put on them. Our caucus has proposed rolling some of these exemptions off. We have not been afraid of it, especially when they don't function the way they're supposed to. But if we really want to do something about exemptions, all we have to do is change the regressive environment in which we have to attract businesses and bring unemployment back down and be competitive. Then we don't have to do any of these things.
To further elaborate on what Representative DeBold is talking about, with regard to the business regulations that we've proposed and that passed unanimously through the Senate, that's what we're attempting to do, is to streamline the regulatory environment to make it a more conducive atmosphere for our businesses to conduct business.
That's right. If you're gonna have this discussion that the governor wants to have, you have to start with working on the regulatory and the tax environment. These are real issues, and we've put Band-Aids on them in a lot of cases in the form of exemptions and incentives. And the only way you get rid of those Band-Aids is have a meaningful discussion about reform of our tax system and our overall regulatory climate. That's the starting point. And we've tried to start that. There are a lot of great bills out there that start that conversation.
Do you think, is there an interest in terms of the final deal and negotiation? Do you imagine an end game where some of the governor's identified exemptions for closure are accepted along with some of the reforms you're talking about? Is that something you're interested in?
We haven't seen the actual details, so I think it's way premature to say that. But I would say that if we're willing to have a discussion, a meaningful discussion about tax reform and about business climate reform and all the things that go into that, then we ought to have. That's I think we're willing to have that. But it's got to be truly addressing the tax burden, or I should say the tax compliance burden, and the complexity, the regulatory burden, and the cost burden we have on it with our industrial insurance in this state. If we're going to have that discussion, I think then we're open.
But I mean, I think you saw on my legislation, I think it was 49-0, very strong, obviously, support for that. What we're saying there is accountability matters. Accountability matters whether it's a tax exemption or whether it's a program. And we need to make sure that we have those performance metrics for both sides of that equation so that we can maximize the dollars that we do have here in Olympia.
And when you said $1 billion, was that what the governor was signaling to you as his target number?
I've heard that through different means here and there.
But that wasn't a personal one-on-one. Did he telegraph that to you, or is this?
I've just heard it through different means.
What are you expecting on the DREAM Act this afternoon? What do you want and what are you expecting?
We actually have an amendment on the DREAM Act that includes, that takes it so you're not pitting one group against another, but it includes all. If you graduate from Washington State high schools, you have the opportunity to apply for this. We have an amendment to do it. We are hoping to pass the bill. We would also, we've been supportive of the bill all along. It's been put on death row a couple times today. It's the last bill of the day, so we're hoping that bill does get out and run. Bruce Chandler and Charles Ross have worked very hard on this bill to make sure it's a bill that we think stays alive and works well for everybody.
Is it going to come up in the Senate?
We'll
see the version that we get out, I guess.
We'll see what comes out of the House.
Well, there is that bill online.
Correct.
Universities that the Democrats are attempting to
and we
amend. Do you expect that to come up or not?
We expect a ruling. That's been scoped, so we expect a ruling sometime this afternoon.
I think it's too bad they're kind of playing a game with it over there. This is a serious bill, and a lot of people are looking at it, and it shouldn't be made political like they're making it. The minority caucus is making it in the Senate. It needs to. We're not unanimous on this in our caucus. And they're not unanimous on it in their caucus. But together, there's probably enough people to pass it. But to politicize it, I thought was wrong.
Senator Braun, what's the status of your paid family leave repeal bill?
So we're still working on that. There's some work out there to try and look at how we could basically make our promise whole and be honest with the taxpayers. We either fund it or let it sunset. I think that's still out there and be worked this afternoon.
So is it no longer a straight repeal bill?
Well, there's a discussion about, all right, if this is a good program, we support the program, is there really a way to fund it? And be honest with the taxpayers, with the citizens of Washington. Either we're going to fund it and maybe we make one more try at funding it, but if we can't, the result is that we repeal the bill and we move forward.
I mean, if you haven't funded a program for 4 years, you start to get, do we really need it? 6 years, you're like, wow, we could be 10 years on this bill.
Right.
The world changes a lot in 10 years.
So why don't you just find out?
Well, we're going to look at those. We're going to look at those possibilities. But the one thing that does surprise me a little is kind of the House approach when it comes to that. They keep saying McCleary, but what's the big first tax thing that they come out with is on that bill? I think you're looking at $1.5 billion. Those are real dollars, and I find it interesting that they say you can't do a transportation package because you have to address McCleary first, but then they come out with $1.5 billion for that.
That didn't get advanced, so
No.
the payroll tax, that died in committee last
So,
I saw.
right.
So do you just not have the votes though in your caucus for a straight repeal for this year?
I know it's one of those. Just as you come down to these cutoffs, you start to look at what is NTIBs necessary to implement the budgets, and there's a lot of those bills that you don't absolutely have to do today, and so just different members are saying, can't you push this one off? I need my bill, and so you're seeing a lot of that jockeying where bills that are NTIB are going to be NTIB.
We saw lots of bills die over here yesterday, so there's a lot of questions around.
What are the worst bills, or the best bills that died yesterday?
My view is you need nothing right now other than to get the budget done and get Washington working again. And so a lot of the bills that we had a lot of Republican bills and Democrat bills that are dying, so it's pretty equal opportunity out here. We'd like to see, we lost more of our bills and rules that we really wanted than the ones that got to the floor.
And if you look at the Senate, we're pretty much singing Kumbaya. We're passing a lot of bills off the floor, and we're doing. You look at the nature of the floor debate today. It has been you're seeing very much a bipartisan effort.
Going with the Kumbaya theme, Schlicker's bill that's going to, I forget the exact details, but it involves the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and all that.
Right.
Is that going to come to the floor today?
Well, every transportation department agency has issues with that bill. We do have a Schlicker bill on the order, so there's no games being played there. So he will get a bill. Again,
it passed 11 to 1. It passed overwhelming bipartisan out of the committee.
Right, but as in any legislative process, you hear different things along the process, and that's why we have the process that we do. You have committee meetings, and sometimes between the committee meeting and the floor, you get additional information. And as we gathered additional information on this bill, you hear more and more things. Our Department of Transportation is saying, no, this is not the right way to go.
So why have public hearings then if you could?
Well, I'd like to further on the Kumbaya theme too, because Senator Braun and myself have worked really hard across the aisle with regard to our business regulatory reform bills to get that bipartisan support.
Obviously, things are going to shift to the budget, but there's also going to be all these policy bills that cross the rotunda. At least in the Senate, and you don't control things here, but in the Senate, what's the plan? Are you going to hear these bills and kind of move them through the system so that they're at least available for negotiation at the end, or do you think we're headed towards a bit of a stalemate where you're not terribly interested in a lot of what moves off the House floor and they're not terribly interested in what moves off?
We're going to have to weigh all these bills, and in the Senate, just like as before, we give our chairs a lot of free rein. When we set this thing up, we were going to go 6 chairs in the minority, 6 chairs in the majority. And under that program, you got to give your chairs full authority. We have 2 chairs, minority chairs now, and then with the co-chairs in transportation, we haven't been real directive. So we'll see, when they have that debate, what comes out of the committees, and then we'll go from there.
So all bills are going to get hearings?
So I can say, I don't think we can say for all committees, but for my committee, Trade and Economic Development, we're going to hear all the bills. They're already scheduled. Now, will they get voted out? That depends on whether there's support for them, but they'll get a hearing.
Same question for you.
Again, that's up to the, I mean,
Chair.
we don't tell our chairs what they can and can't do.
You have a great deal of influence, though, so are you going to influence them to vote on, at least put them up for hearings, or are you going to have them sit pocket veto?
Again, it's up to the chair.
I can say,
I
as
mean,
a-
I'm not going to go to Senator Hobbs or Senator Hatfield and say, you know, you have free reign, and then I'm going to go to one of my chairs and say, but no, I get to tell you what to do. No, I mean, the way we directed this, we very much structured this in a bipartisan approach where our chairs would have a lot of authority.
And regarding Senator Hobbs, his Facebook bill, is it going to be coming out this afternoon? And also Senator Braun's paid sick leave?
The Hobbs, I think, is the next. It's the next. We were going to hear it. It's on the order of consideration, I believe. I know there's an internet Hobbs bill. I assume it's the same bill.
Okay. That's paid sick leave?
that, as I said earlier, we're still working on that, and there's
That's-
a couple of different options that make that go forward, but I'm not ready to commit on any of them yet.
But that is NTIB, so that's
Yeah,
not
exactly. So it's less of a time crunch than some of the other issues. There's frankly on a number of lists that are, or a number of bills that are higher priority because we have some flexibility on that part.
But I think, you know, you look at, like, I have a electrical vehicle charging bill coming out. I think, you know, that will come out with strong support. But probably the most, one of the bigger bills out there is the wellness program that we had that out of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. You know, there was a lot of consternation on that bill. Senator Kaiser and myself have come together and worked on that, and we have an amendment on the bar, so you will be seeing that passed. King County's had phenomenal success with that, and so I think we will be bringing that with strong support out of the Senate and hopefully see that adopted here in the House.
I missed the first part of it. Did you address, even if background checks had made it out of the House, would it get any traction in the Senate?
Again,
It
didn't make it out of the House.
What about
Even if it
resurrecting?
did, would it gain any traction?
It didn't make it out of the
What
House.
about resurrecting it as a sponsor and given the number of sponsors in the Senate? Could it come out of your chamber?
It's not, it's a policy bill, and we're at policy cutoff as of today.
Well, can you explain then, just because it did have so many co-sponsors in the Senate and you are one
Correct.
of them,
Correct.
why it didn't? Why didn't it?
Again, I mean, we give our chairs a lot, you know, the way we set this thing up is it was going to be a 6-6-3. And with that, you can't sit there and tell your 6 chairs, I have total authority over you. And by the way, we have 6 other chairs that have free reign to do whatever they want. So in this structure, we've given our chairs a lot of authority.
Does the structure allow for bringing bills like that? I realize there's a policy cutoff, but are you interested, as the leader of this coalition, as a Democrat and as a co-sponsor of a measure like that, would it be acceptable to you to bypass the committee process and take things directly to the floor, or would that, in your mind, blow up essentially the coalition that you formed? Would
Yeah,
it be incongruous?
Well, I don't think it, I mean, we have set up a structure, and I think we've said I strongly support the bill. I'm, might be obviously a minority in our majority caucus on that. But we have set up a structure where we are focused, again, on jobs, education, and the budget. I think we're doing a phenomenal job at that. You look at our education program, I think it's the best I've seen here in my 11th year here. I think, we're doing great things on the job market, and I think you will see a budget that will definitely show you our focus, and our focus, again, will be on helping our businesses and making sure we have a world-class education system at both the K through 12 and the higher education.
And don't forget, the speaker has a large majority, and he didn't move the bill. Okay? I mean, so if you think it can move from a tight coalition government, well, then you're not paying attention to that he couldn't move it with a large majority. It sat here, and I don't know who sat with us, some of you did, for 2 days. And the bill didn't move, and he kept saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So, I think that's a really unfair question when you have a body that's been in total control that can't move it, and you're going to ask a coalition government if they're going to try to pull it up without a hearing. I think that's unfair.
We will not go to the 9th order for it, let me tell you that.
Any other questions for today?
Just real quick on the paid family leave do you consider that NTIB because of setup costs, or because there's no funding source, we don't really know who gets hit with the cost at this point?
Right. I mean, there is and Gary can probably explain this better, but there's, there's costs, there's bow wave cost in that bill. If you look at the administration of it, I think it was 50 to 60 million bucks, on an annual basis, which, that's the last thing we need when we're trying to do McCleary, is a bill that, has another 100 million bucks in biennial costs from an administrative standpoint that, we need to be directing to education.
So it might not come up on the floor today, and it shouldn't be considered dead if it's not.
Correct.
How about the training, same question, but regarding the training wage bill?
So the training wage bill, we are close on that, but the issue is to have long-term success. We have a lot of support for that, but to have long-term success, we want to bring it out of the Senate with a significant bipartisan support. We have interest in doing that. We may not make it this year, and I think it's wiser to build that support and bring it out in a way that we can make it all the way through and implement it than to just to rush it and have it just languish over in the House.
Okay. So if it doesn't hit the floor by 5 o'clock, it's
then
dead
know it
for
didn't
the
hit
year.
the floor. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But again, what we're trying to do is recognizing that, we do have to deal with a, democratically controlled House. We're trying to send these bills out of the Senate with as bipartisan approach as we can. And with that, I think we send a strong message that, let's not play politics. We've gone with the R&D theme. Both people are on board, and let's do some of these bills that are good for Washington State.
Anything else?
Any thoughts on Argentine Pope?
Is that the announcement?
Wow, that's just like, I will tell you this. I think that we had some Catholics that were in our caucus today that came running in to say there's white smoke, and they were very excited about what's going on. So, I know the U.S. wanted the first pope, though, right?
Right, but it's
I know one thing, there's probably nothing that we could say here today
Yeah,
that
that's gonna
we will
impact
not
that.
have the headline today. So let me just
Do you
put
know when
that.
the Senate budget rollout will be, if next Wednesday's the revenue forecast?
So we've been saying, anywhere, it will be before April 1st.
Okay. Thank you guys for coming today.